Hello, my name is Tim Burrage. I just thought I would create a short tutorial on post-processing depth of field blur. This isn't necessarily exclusive to Blender. You can output a depth matte from Maya or 3ds Max or any tool that you use, really. They should have the capability of that. But I'll be using Blender just to show you how I do it. So I'll be using Photoshop as well as Blender and doing the blurring in Photoshop. This can be done in After Effects. I might do another tutorial. If you're doing it in After Effects, mainly you'd be doing it in After Effects because it's an animation or a video. I'm just doing it in Photoshop this time because it's just for a still image render. So I just set up a little simple scene here with a whole bunch of bottles using the array modifier. This is them on their low res Catmull Clark subdivisions. Let's just turn it up. So this is basically what the rendered bottles are going to be looking like. Rendering it in cycles with a glass BSDF. So I'll just open up preview to show you what we're going to be looking at. It's a very repetitious pattern kind of. I'm going for something a bit abstract here. Anyway, I've already rendered this out for you. I'll open up the file here. I rendered it out as an EXR sequence. Oh, not sequence, just a single EXR image. Main reason for doing EXR is just so for post-processing you have more control over colors and depth and whatnot. It's not exactly a high dynamic range image here, like the lighting's not too crazy, but I just didn't want to lose any quality. So this is the rendered image. And I'll show you how I saved out a depth matte and a depth pass and how we're going to change that around in Photoshop. So once you've rendered the image, Blender always renders out the Z depth whenever you render an image, but the trick is to be able to use this in Photoshop, you have to then go into compositing, click use nodes, the render layer and the composite nodes will show up. What you need to do then is go Shift A and vector, then add the normalize input, and then we're just going to join that from Z to normalize and normalize to composite. Then in your render result layer, it'll show up here as a grayscale image going from white to black or black to white as the kind of like depth of the image, which is why it's called Z depth. Then just go image, save a copy, and save it out as a 32-bit float full EXR, open EXR. The reason why we're saving out as a 32-bit float EXR is because we want the really fine, we want a really full gradient and lots of control over this grayscale image because we'll be playing around with it later. So I'll just open up Photoshop. I have my two files saved into a folder. I will drag the I called it bottles.exr, the beauty pass, like the render. Just click OK as transparency because there's no alpha in this image. The alpha channel will be included, but it'll just be white. So now that we have that, open up the folder again and drag the depth pass on top. As you can see, we have two layers now in this Photoshop file. We have our color render and our depth pass. Now in order to use this depth pass, first we want to change it around a bit because black is generally seen as the furthest away from the camera, and white as the closest. And in this normalized depth pass from Blender, we have it the wrong way around. So I'm just selecting the layout and opening up the levels adjustment under the adjustments tab. I'm just going to grab this white, drag it into the middle, and then grab the black and drag it to the other end. This is just basically inverting the image. Now it's a bit bright and not quite dark enough at the end, so I'm going to click the exposure tab. You have these 3 droppers down here. This is very useful for depth passes. Click the one with the black dropper and click the very back of the image. That'll set the black point, and then click the white and click the bottle closest to the front. That'll set the white point. Now we have like a really good depth between the very front object and the very furthest object. So now that we have that, use the selection marquee rectangular tool. Select the whole image and go edit copy. Select the beauty render, leaving everything else visible, and go into the channels tab. Create a new channel. It'll be called Alpha 1, and then just paste that in the Alpha tab. Control D to deselect. Control D to deselect the selection before. And now we're just going to hide the depth pass and the 2 levels and exposure adjustment layers, because we don't need those now that we have the correct depth pass as the alpha channel. So now just go back to your layer, go filter, blur. Now the thing about rendering out as a 32-bit EXR is that certain features of Photoshop like lens blur don't work on 32-bit images. So we're just going to go image mode and click 8 bits per channel. It says reducing the document depth can affect the layered HDR images. So we're just going to click don't merge, and now we have our images now 8 bits per channel instead of 32. So let's just try the blur. Good, lens blur is now showing up, so just click lens blur. What this does is blurs the image. When you do open up a lens blur, the source depth map will be selected as none. You just have to click Alpha 1, which is the channel that we created, and then it should do the blurring itself. Now as you can see, the cursor in this window is a little cross, and what we can do is we can click anywhere in the image and it will set the depth of the blur to that point. Now if we just click, I just clicked faster for the preview there, just so it's a bit speedier. And let's try, because we have some artifacting. If you look, if you look at some of these blurred bottlenecks, the top rim of the bottle isn't blurred the way it really should be. So let's just try clicking invert and then resetting the blur focal distance by clicking the neck of a bottle that we want to select. As you can see, this isn't really actually working because we did have the depth map set correctly with black further away. The purpose of the invert tool is that it can do that basically for you, instead of you having to edit the depth map in Photoshop before importing it. Now, so let's just get rid of the invert, move the depth back to somewhere nice that we can see it about there. Change the distribution to Gaussian. We don't have any noise. Basically, the noise slider here is just for adding noise to blurred parts of the image. There's also a specular highlights slider here. What this does is if you have pixels out of focus that are bright, it can make them brighter according to a threshold like that. So just it's mimicking things that lenses apparently do naturally. You can set the iris. This changes the bokeh shape, so like an octagon will be pretty smooth and circular, whilst a square should be pretty square. And blade curvature and rotation you can play around with. So now that that's set and the depth of field is looking good, just click OK. As I said, there is some issue in the foreground. See, if we look at the background of the image, the bottlenecks are blurred quite nicely. But if you look at the foreground, the front bottles, there's some errors happening and some artifacting, with the top of the opening of the bottle being too sharp on the leading edge and blurred everywhere else. So we're just going to use the blur tool just to blur these a bit more. There is a plugin for After Effects that I talked about, as well as for Photoshop, called Lens Care, I think by Frisch Luft or something. It's a German company, and the reason why this plugin exists is that it doesn't have these issues. I'll make another tutorial about using After Effects for this, using that plugin, but basically in After Effects, using the Lens Care plugin, you don't, if you set up correctly, you don't get this artifacting on the very front of the image that we have here, just because it's a little bit better designed than the tools in Photoshop and After Effects default. After Effects normal. I think they have a camera blur tool or something that uses the depth mat, but doesn't correct these issues. But that's good enough, so you can then save that out as a PNG or JPEG or whatever you want to use it for. The benefit of blurring in post-production versus in Blender is, especially if you're using cycles, cycles depth of field will be ray traced depth of field, and this means that if you have a low sample count, maybe your render might show up pretty noiseless, but the actual blurry bits, the depth of field, will really be like noisy and grainy, just because there isn't enough rays per pixel there. That means that you really have to turn up the sample count a lot in order to get smooth depth of field. I had to do that in a recent video I uploaded to YouTube, the iPhone 6 concept video. I had a lot of depth of field in that clip, and basically I had to end up rendering at around 900 samples. which meant the render times were around 4 minutes a frame. So for a 30-second clip, it ended up taking quite a few hours, and that was really a pain. If I knew how to do post-processing depth of field, I could have rendered out the image with no cycles depth of field, saved out the depth mats, depth passes, and then done the post-processing in After Effects, which would have ended up being quite a bit faster, because I wouldn't have had to have the sample count on the cycles render up so high. Probably would have been about 300 or 400 versus 900 samples. Yeah, so this is a tutorial on using depth of field for still images, and I might make another one for moving animations.